Welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. This week, Google's rolling out Marketing Advisor, an AI agent built into Chrome that gives marketers tailored recommendations, plus a new AI shopping mode to streamline product searches. Instagram's bringing voice transcriptions to DM, as Adam Mosseri doubles down on private sharing being the app's biggest shift. We're also unpacking how small businesses are relying on social media now more than ever, and what that means for marketers today. Plus, we chat about some of our recent favourite campaigns, including Lancome's nostalgic Juicy Tubes comeback and Aldi's no-nonsense take on breakfast rules. Plus, we hear from Sophie Lee about taking bold risks in your career. Let's get into it. So, what's been happening in the world of marketing in the last few weeks? Well, I feel like all we ever do is talk about AI in marketing at the moment, but it is a very relevant topic and something that a lot of our community say, how can I make sure that I'm on like the pulse with what's going on with AI? And I would say it's somewhat impossible because let's be honest, it's changing all the time. Mm-hmm. But one update that we wanted to bring, because it feels particularly relevant for a lot of people in our community, is the fact that Google is unleashing AI agents for marketers. So they're apparently releasing a range of different types of AI agents, but one of them is going to be called Marketing Advisor. Mm-hmm. It's going to be baked into the Chrome browser. So obviously if you don't use Chrome, then potentially this is a good thing to do, start using it. It's going to be rolled out later this year, so it's not currently available right now, but it's going to help marketers basically complete certain tasks according to their objectives and just tailor what they're doing in their marketing strategy. So for example, Marketing Advisor might realise when a site could benefit from better tagging, also maybe things like meta titles and that sort of thing. Now, the reason that I think this is really good, especially for our community, is that a lot of people are in small marketing teams or one-person marketing teams. So I think this is really relevant so an AI agent is something that will go away and actually do something for you, like end-to-end a task, for example. So it means that if you're a one-person marketing team, you've essentially got another pair of digital virtual hands, if you will. So I think it is a really good addition. I'll be interested to see how it works and if there's like a pricing model behind it, what sort of thing, like just in general, how people are going to use it. Also, what other agents they're going to release as well. But the Marketing Advisor one specifically, it feels of interest to us in our community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right, exactly that's, I think, the interesting part is that, okay, for people who work for much larger organizations, how important it'll be for them, I don't know. But I definitely think that these are the sorts of updates that really can play a role in supporting marketers who are maybe one-person teams or from smaller teams. And I think that the interesting part as well for me is that what they've kind of said about kind of basing their recommendations and basing what they're doing off of like marketers' objectives and stuff is interesting. And I think that additional level of kind of understanding is, it'll be interesting to see how that works, because we talk about it all the time as marketers, don't we, about like, defining objectives and making sure that whatever you're doing is, kind of tied into what you're trying to achieve and stuff like that. So if you can get these sorts of like AI kind of support tools and stuff like that are also working alongside you and towards your marketing objectives as well, and like understanding what it is that you're trying to do. Interesting to see how that rolls out, definitely. And want to keep an eye on, like you say, particularly for people who are maybe individual marketers and stuff like that, and see how it could hopefully help to take a little bit off their plate, I guess.
Yeah, so Dan Taylor, who's Google's VP of Global Ads, said to Adweek basically it's Google leaning into the fact that AI can be that promise of a piece of support that will allow you to get work done faster. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately what's happening, isn't it? Is how do we make AI something that allows us to automate parts of maybe more boring parts of the job or more admin parts of the job? Because, a lot of people in our community, and I speak to a lot of people, are worried, a little bit scared, a little bit overwhelmed at the idea of AI. And we are using it very lightly at the moment, I think, as marketers. But what's really interesting is how we see this new wave of AI agents and stuff like that coming into play. I think we definitely should try as much as we can to embrace it and think of it as we said, an extra pair of hands. It's something that will help you automate. It's there to make your job done faster, but also easier. And just like it allows the kind of workload to be a lot lighter as well, because it means you don't have to take up all of that extra space with things like admin and stuff that typically would just be quite boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Definitely. I agree. Another update is, I feel like, again, we talk about AI, we talk a lot about Instagram and a lot of their platform updates. I feel like they have a lot. So just another one to kind of quickly update on is that Instagram are continually adding new updates to like their DM features, which I think is interesting because they've kind of come out and said that they're seeing quite a shift in how users are using Instagram, and particularly with a shift towards video, photo, messages, etc., being shared more and more in the DMs, which is an interesting one for brands, I think. And I think kind of ties into how we've seen a lot lately, you know, brands leaning into strategies that incorporate like the features of DMs. So, you know, sharing posts and then like, comment this on a post and we'll send you a DM with the link. Or there was a campaign, I think it was a little while ago, that was by IKEA, I think it was, that like sent some DMs to some of their followers being like, you up or something like that, I think it was. And then it was like sending them like links to recommend like new mattresses and stuff. I don't know. I think brands are kind of experimenting with new stuff in the DMs, but that again is in line with this shift towards more people using like the messaging features in the app. So I think they're introducing a feature that will transcribe voice notes that are sent in Instagram DMs, which I think is an interesting one, because I don't know about you, I love to send a voice note. Like I think it's really convenient on the go. I don't always necessarily have the capacity to listen to a voice note depending where I am, you know, if I'm out and about or whatever. So sometimes like you want to send the voice note and then like read a message back. So having that option to read the transcription, I think is really useful. And they're also, I think, increasing the length of voice notes that you can share. So it's an interesting one. I send a lot of voice notes. I tend to typically send them on WhatsApp, to be honest. I don't really send voice notes on social media apps like Instagram, to be honest. Only because like I personally don't really speak to like my close friends in that way. But again, I'm a millennial. Who knows how other users or generations are going to be using the app going forward. So it's definitely based on insights that they've got anyway, that more people are seeming to be communicating in the DMs. I think for me, on a personal level, I communicate in the DMs on Instagram. Like I respond to stories, but I'll also like, I share posts. Like I'll see something and I'll be like, oh yeah, like that's funny. I'll like, that reminds me of such and such. And I just kind of like share it and be like, it's you, lol, or whatever. But they're obviously seeing a huge shift in that. So an interesting one, I guess, for brands to think about. I don't really know how else necessarily brands could jump into this. I always think it's hard for brands to kind of capitalize on shifts into more, like direct messaging spaces. I think it's always a bit trickier for brands to really kind of get in there, unless it is through, like what I just said, thinking about how they can create that sort of content that does make you want to share it in the DMs with a friend or whatever it might be. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think, obviously, we've seen the introduction of the broadcast channels and a lot of brands leaning into that. I think that's a really nice addition. I have seen quite a lot of big brands utilize the broadcast channels, but also smaller brands. There's kind of like local small businesses that I use that are in my area that actually have started to use broadcast channels as well.
Interesting.
Specifically ones that maybe have like members, or if you have like a subscription or something like that, things like gyms or places where you can go, like clubs and that sort of thing. I've seen a lot of businesses utilize that, which I think helps with the whole interacting in DMs. Obviously the broadcast channel, the idea is that you send out messages, but also people can reply to that as well. I think it's a really nice way that you can directly engage with your audience, because before kind of chatting in DMs, what would have been the way to interact with people directly? Probably email, which is fine, but it's not, for me, I wouldn't say email is like a quick response thing. So you wouldn't reply to an email with like a one word answer. Whereas if you're a brand and you said something, yes or no, you could reply really easily with yes or no. However, with that being said, I know that I haven't really been involved in anything like that as a consumer, in terms of I haven't joined any broadcast channels that are, well, I don't know, actually I have joined a few, but not from like big brands.
Yeah.
So like your kind of big conglomerate brands, I've joined more kind of smaller
Like
ones,
local.
which again maybe leans into the idea of community. I'm not too bothered about, you know, hearing what the big huge brands have got to say, but I like the idea of the smaller ones. And also I always want to know what's a value add for me as well. So am I getting something extra for joining, or am I chatting to the people who are similar minded to me in that kind of like group chat, if you will? So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what you said about the transcribing the voice clips as well. I love the fact this is so like professional, like corporate of me, but Slack actually does that.
Yeah.
And I love that because I'm the same as you. Sometimes I do mostly send voice notes over WhatsApp, but sometimes it's easier if you're explaining something from like a work capacity to just send a voice note. And I often do it with one of the girls who works on our team that's a freelancer, and she'll say, oh, we've got this problem and we need some help with it, blah, blah, blah. And she'll explain it by a voice note. And as you say, sometimes it's like, I'll listen to it, but actually for me to really understand it, looking at the transcription is so much easier. So Slack already does that. So I love the fact that Instagram is doing that as well. Yeah. And I do agree. Sometimes it annoys me that WhatsApp doesn't do it, because I would prefer to just read a message over listen to.
Well, exactly, because I think on WhatsApp for me, I often find that if someone sent me a voice note that is like a minute or two long or something, and I know I can't listen to it because I'm out and about or I can't really take it in fully, I end up not responding to that person for hours or a day or whatever it might be, because I just don't have the time. Or, I get like, sometimes when you get that sort of like paralysis of like being able to do it, and then you put it off for that long, you just keep putting it off and keep putting it off, and then it's like that this unlistened to voice note has been there for like 3 days, and I'm like, it's only 45 seconds, why don't I just listen to it? But it's like, oh, it feels like it's been too long, and so the conversation just kind of cut short. Whereas if I could have read the transcription, I could have gone back to them because I'd have known what it said, or it could have been summarized. So I do think that maybe for me is a bit lacking in WhatsApp. So potentially a really useful addition for Instagram, definitely. And I think it's useful on Slack as well. For sure.
Although normally my voice notes on WhatsApp are like 8 minutes long.
So it'd be like read and like scroll.
So I actually think I listen to most voice notes in like 1.5 or 2.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll do exactly what you said. I'll wait until it's like later on and I'll play it, and it'll just be, I'll have to have my full attention. I actually had one from my friend the other day that was that long. I had a list of notes.
To like make notes to what to respond
notes to reply to.
That's so funny.
But I don't think I would ever interact on Instagram in that way. No. So it's interesting how all of these different things are the different ways that we interact as consumers. Obviously, as marketers, we're even more aware of it because, we're just in that world. But it's so interesting to know how we interact with different people. WhatsApp is my main mode of communication. Instagram I use very similar to you in terms of like sending things or replying to stories or that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of changes over time, and as brands lean into utilising Instagram a little bit more for DMs and stuff like that, how we see that change happening.
I think you're so right as well what you said about us being marketers and how we see things, because I think it's something that I have to constantly sort of be mindful of and take a step away from like being a marketer and look at certain platforms just purely from a consumer perspective, because really I think you can get caught up in, always looking at it from a work angle and, what do consumers want and what can you give to them as a brand? And, if you're on LinkedIn, it's, especially if you're a marketer, you're pretty much going to be in a bit of a marketing echo chamber, and everyone's talking about, you've got to use this platform for this and this new feature does that. And it is all great and it's interesting to know, but I like to take myself out of it, speak to my friends that don't work in marketing. And I remember a perfect example was the introduction of Threads, and beyond like people that I knew that were talking about Threads on like LinkedIn and about it being this new Instagram channel. And to be fair, like the data shows that apparently Threads is like, it's being well used and there's been a lot of uptake, but nobody that I knew was interested in Threads. No one really knew what it was. Nobody had like their Threads channel on their Instagram where they'd created one and were like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this as well. Like nobody was bothered. Like they really just didn't want to use it in my kind of circle anyway. So I remember speaking to someone and being like, oh, have you seen Threads? And it's this new thing. And they were just like, yeah, and like, it just wasn't a thing. So I think it's so funny what you say about, like thinking about it purely from a consumer perspective as well. And like, do people actually want these updates? Or are they the people that we know? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's other people that
No, I agree.
aren't our friends.
Yeah, literally. There's another update as well, another Google update actually, which normally we are quite social. There's a lot of things going on social, but a lot of things happening with Google, but it is another AI advancement.
Of course.
Of course. And this is to do with shopping.
Yeah.
So basically, Google are hoping to soon launch a new shopping experience focused on like AI. So basically what it's going to do is help you narrow down your product search. So the idea is that like if you want a certain product or item, that it will help you on how to layer it and like dress it, for example. So really interesting to see this happening, because obviously we've seen a lot of AR, VR like happen in the last few years. And I think Google leaning into this from a shopping perspective is really interesting.
Definitely interesting. And I think it really leans into, I think, how people like to consume nowadays, because I think we've spoken about this on the podcast before, but, you know, for me, I quite like to follow people who have obviously a similar style to me, or, you know, they dress in a similar way. Maybe they also have like a similar body type, because I think from my perspective, if I'm watching the things that they try on, I get that sort of experience. What you're saying about, you know, with AI being able to like show it on you or visualize it on you, I kind of see it on them and I think, oh, you're like a similar height to me. That would probably work quite well. You know, you've got like, I don't know, like long legs or whatever. And I always like to, I often find that I'll see something on someone and then I end up, you know, maybe that day or a few days later being like, oh yeah, I'm going to get that because I really liked how it looked on them. So I think it is leaning into how consumers like to shop, and it's really successful from an influencer UGC kind of perspective. So it's just like Google looking how to create AI opportunities to do the same and like piece outfits together, and from like a shopping perspective as well.
Yeah, I think it makes sense from Google's perspective, because if you think, right, you're searching Google for something, whether it's a top or some jeans or something, and then you're solely going on to buy the item, but then it's also saying, oh, like this would look good with it, or like you could layer this bag on top, or these shoes, or this cap, or something like that, that you're then ultimately going to get you're going to pay even more. Your basket's going to get bigger, but that means that they're getting you shopping longer and you're having more of that experience. And I do think the idea of it is good. It's just how that plays out in reality and how people use that. Because I know, for example, I've used a lot of AI kind of modes and models when it comes to shopping for in-person stuff. So, you know, you have the thing of when you're in a room and you can figure out where your furniture is going, that sort of thing. I love that. And I always, when that's not an option, I feel lost. Yeah. Genuinely, because I'm like, oh, I would really like to buy that piece of furniture, but I do not know what it would look like in my house. Yeah. And I do sometimes feel like that about clothes. You know, I see a lot of different clothes and I'm like, oh, would that look nice on me? Similar to you, it's like, who are the types of people that I could look at? But then it's also like, would that actually look like that on me? Because yeah, they might have a similar body composite to me, but like, is it really? Yeah. So I think the idea of actually seeing it for myself. Yeah. Could be a good one.
Definitely. I agree. And I think again though, like it comes back to, you know, it's for a consumer, you know, it's consumer driven. It's to drive sales, it's to drive people buying things. I mean, I've spoken about this before, but I've started to do something where like I'll go to TikTok, for example, to kind of shop my own wardrobe. And I quite like the idea of something like that, you know, that's not necessarily just about buying new things. Yeah. I think it could definitely be used by people. Like you could use this sort of thing without actually going on to buy. You could be like, use it as a tool to, you know, see what goes nicely with something and then kind of go, oh, actually I've got something like that in my wardrobe. So I think it's still nice for inspiration and stuff, isn't it? Because I think that's kind of the conflict that I personally sometimes have. And I know a lot of other people have, is that I think a lot of the things that, you know, a lot of these tools, they're great and they're so innovative, but they're very much driving like consumption. Like, oh, you've searched for this top, well, why don't you buy like these other 3 items that also would look good with it? And then it's like buy more, buy more, buy more. So I think that those sorts of tools, like maybe used in a different way as well, could be really beneficial to like, yeah, I don't know, encourage you to, be more creative with what you've already got.
Be more sustainable.
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of industry research, there was one kind of main thing that we wanted to talk about, which was a study has been released saying that small businesses rely heavily on social media marketing for growth and just in general for marketing. Now, when I read this, I thought this is so true because I know a lot of small businesses that don't do any marketing other than social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, small businesses think that marketing is social media.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think from a capacity perspective, if you're a small business and you're also the founder of the business, you're the admin person, the receptionist, the finance person, the marketing person, you're not necessarily going to be able to do in-depth CRM or like SEO strategies or PR or stuff like that. But I think it's really interesting to understand the fact that it is a main channel for small businesses and that's not going to change. Well, it doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. Now, in the study, it's kind of came out that Facebook is the most popular platform, and 82% of the respondents used social media, used Facebook to promote the products and connect with customers. And only 71% of respondents were using Instagram.
That's crazy.
Which I still think you've got another 29% of small businesses. Quick maths. 29% of small businesses weren't using it, and 69% were using YouTube, which, can I just say,
I think that's high.
That's really high,
that's
considering
really high.
Instagram is 71.
Yeah, I think that's really high. I was really surprised by that.
We absolutely love recording the podcast, but it's great to know what you think of the episodes too. Come and join our broadcast channel on Instagram to get involved in the chat. Let us know what you think of the episodes and what you want to hear more of.
But yeah, I think also what you said before about, kind of it being the go-to from a marketing perspective. So 71% of those surveyed have an in-house department or specific staff dedicated to creating content for social media. So I do think that it shows that even if it's not just like, one person, the founder doing everything, and they do kind of hire a team, it is more than likely going to be social media. If they're going to hire someone to support with content or support with marketing, it's going to be someone with a focus on social media, which I think it is very true. It's not necessarily that surprising. There are social media channels popping up everywhere. The users of all of these different platforms is growing year on year. So many more people are on social media. And I think, it's evident in like the number of people that we've seen, go from, as marketers, go from maybe like in-house social media managers or content creators to like taking their business freelance and, supporting small businesses from like a freelancing perspective or whatever it might be, because there are so many businesses that are in need of that support and know that they've got so much potential to grow, whether it's as a local business, reaching like potential local audiences or whatever it might be. There's so many opportunities, TikTok Shop and all of these different things that, kind of e-com businesses can benefit from. So I think it's interesting, but I was surprised by that YouTube stat as well, because I feel like YouTube is, of all the social media platforms, to like put time to it, it's a lot more time consuming and kind of fairly more complex to do well and to, to kind of have a successful strategy for.
Yeah, but they're not necessarily saying it's successful.
True. Maybe they're just like, we're just trying our hand at it.
Just using it.
Don't get anything from it, but we're doing it because you think, maybe.
We actually didn't mention the name, so it's the 6th annual State of Small Business survey. So if anyone wants to go away and have a look, especially if you're interested in small businesses, it's a state of small businesses in general. So it's not just marketing, it's kind of everything.
Yeah.
So there is a lot in there as well about AI. I know we've covered AI today, so we won't talk more about that.
Please.
But it also talks about obviously how we use social media and stuff like that, and just how much small businesses are utilising different channels, if they are, if they're not. So it's a really good one to actually read if you are someone, like you say, who maybe works a lot with small businesses, or you're interested, or you work for a small business, because I think small businesses make up the majority of businesses in the UK. So it's definitely a really good one.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to the next section, which is where we have someone feature to answer one of our audience questions. We've got quite an inspiring one, I think, this week.
Yeah.
We get asked all sorts of questions by our audience, right? Like, our community ask sometimes the most absolutely niche questions ever, which we try as best as we can to support with. But obviously, for the purposes of the podcast, we've got a lot of listeners. We always want to try and kind of get guests on who can share like really useful, hopefully inspirational kind of snippets and insights that will kind of, help our audience go away feeling like, I can do that too. So we've got Sophie Lee joining us this week to answer our question.
Yeah.
What is that we asked her again?
Yes, so Sophie Lee is the founder of Electric Peach.
Yeah.
She was actually on the podcast
Yeah,
It was a while ago now. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of seasons ago. I think it might have been last season potentially, or
Right.
the season before. I definitely recommend people go and listen to it. It's a really great episode. Very inspirational. She's had such an amazing career. She's worked at the likes of Disney in like crazy places. She's worked in comms a lot. All mad things and places and people and everything. It's amazing. And she's done a lot to build her career. So when we sat down and we were like, what do we actually want to ask Sophie, and what does our community want to hear from Sophie? We asked, as someone who has built a successful marketing career by not being afraid to take risks, what advice would you give to someone who's in need of a confidence boost or the sign to just go for it? So let's listen to Sophie's answer now.
Every bold move I've made in my career has come very much with fear sitting in the passenger seat. Actually, often it's been with fear sitting on my lap, screaming at me as we're hurtling at breakneck speed down the road. And I'm hoping that the road is going to lead to something absolutely glorious, but it very well could lead to the edge of a cliff. But what I have learned is that the more I've pushed myself and the more I've taken these risks, the more opportunities have presented themselves, even in the ways that I might not have expected. And really, this wasn't about confidence. It was about choosing to move anyway. Confidence is a muscle, and you need to build that muscle. And you do that through taking the action. It doesn't come before action, it comes from action. So if you're waiting for a sign, this is it. Take the leap, do the thing. You don't have to feel 100% ready. You just have to feel ready enough to back yourself, even just a little bit, so that you can start building that confidence muscle, and also so that you can start learning along the way. This is such a great time to take risks in marketing, as we see so much of the same old. Now is a time to really get creative and have some fun with it. That's really how you stand out and how you become known as an industry expert. And try not to take yourself too seriously.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that from Sophie. I think so true. I heard the saying, confidence is a muscle that you build, not that long ago, actually. And I've said it quite a bit since, and I think it's so true. People that I speak to a lot often say, how have you got to where you are, or how are you actually doing what you're doing? How are you so confident? And I'm like, I wasn't always like this. One, I'm not as confident as I definitely can be, and it's a journey for sure, but also it's something that you do all of the time. And what Sophie said there about action is so important. Sometimes it is really scary to take risks, but if you are able to, and you're in the position where you feel maybe not 100% ready, but at least kind of like 50 to 60% ready, I think you should. If there's a bit of doubt there, just maybe forget about it.
Yeah. And I think it's such an important message. And I think one that for us at Girls in Marketing, and what we have literally just this week launched, I think is a really important and a really relevant message. Obviously, this week we have just launched our brand new Freelancing for Marketers course, which is something that has been in the works for quite some time now. We have known for a really long time that it was something that we wanted to create, because there is just been so much demand for something like this from our marketing community. We obviously have a huge community of marketers in all sorts of different marketing roles, and we have a lot of people who have either maybe recently started their freelance journey, but they just are really lacking in that kind of direction of where to take it, how to really make it successful, how to build on something and turn it into something that they're proud of, and that can, be like maybe something full-time for them. We also have people who, freelance as a bit of a side hustle and maybe want to turn it into a bigger career, or they just want to know how to make it a successful side hustle and make it something that they can continue to do alongside their full-time roles or something like that. And we get questions all the time. Anytime we talk about freelancing, we are inundated with, how do I start? How do I price my services? Have I got enough experience to freelance? How do I actually find clients? How do I put myself out there? How would anyone know about me? With so many other, agencies, etc., that are out there, why would anyone choose me? So we basically kind of saw this as our calling, really, to create something that would help marketers with this, because, from from the perspective of somebody who feels like you've got the potential to freelance and you've got the desire to, but you don't know where to start, it can be quite overwhelming. So the course that we've created is hopefully that. It's something that can channel everything that, you know, you need to do, and also answer all of those fears. You know, it literally breaks down all of those barriers that, generally speaking, hold people back, or, you know, act as the barriers to them actually taking that leap into freelancing. It breaks it all down. We've got some amazing expert creators on the course with us, Gina and Crystal as well, who again have different but, you know, equally successful and, you know, experienced kind of careers in freelancing and building businesses and stuff like that. So I feel like that just kind of from Sophie really resonates with what we've launched just now with our freelancing course, and hopefully that message inspires some people to, you know, maybe if you've been thinking about going freelance, take a look at the course, have a think about if that might be something that you want to do. If you've been thinking about freelancing, this is your sign from Sophie, from us to really do it and just see what comes of it.
Definitely. I think the freelancing industry is a lot of smoke and mirrors. I think people often feel like there's like bits of information, but they're not entirely sure what's right. And you can go online and you can be like, how do I price my services? But actually, as a freelancer working in marketing, we talk about the different pricing models that you can use. We break it down in how you can actually go away with proper packages or an hourly rate or whatever kind of works for you. And I think a lot of the advice online is very generic. So the idea of this course is the fact that you can go on, you can do it all, and you can utilize the practical elements. So we have things like templates in there as well. So it's super practical. You can go away with lots, and you don't have to feel like you're on your own either. So the idea of this as well is that we can obviously support you in that journey. So there is a lot to unpack in it, and it's definitely not something that's going to happen overnight. The course, I would say you want to kind of take your time with it. So it's over 6 modules. So even if you say to yourself, I'm going to do a module every other week or something like that, it's self-paced, so you can use it at your own time. You've got access for whenever you want. You can access it on your phone or on a laptop or a desktop or anything like that. So I definitely think, as you say, if you've been thinking of a sign to go for it, this is it for sure.
Yeah, whether it's a short-term goal, a long-term goal, whether you decide to do a module a month and launch a freelancing career, you know, 2026, it gives you the time to really think about it. But yeah, definitely loved Sophie's message, and she always brings really good energy.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let's talk about our favourites to finish today. There's quite a few at the moment. I know you want to talk about the Lancome one. So do you want to talk about that first?
So for me, as again, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll know I am very much a millennial, and that's okay. And I've been loving the recent Lancome campaign, which is celebrating their 25 years of Juicy Tubes. So for me, this is so nostalgic, not least because I very much remember being in school and collecting like the Juicy Tubes. It was something actually, funnily, anytime anyone went on holiday. So if you went on holiday with your family, it was something that you'd always buy one in the airport. It was just a thing. I don't know whether that was just me or my friends. If anybody else did that, please do share and let me know. But it was like it was kind of like your badge of I've been on holiday, and I'd come back to school with like this fresh new Juicy Tube. Really weird, but you know, it was like, I don't know, back then when I was in school, it wasn't really like, you didn't really wear much makeup, but like you'd wear your new Juicy Tube, and it was like a sign that you had this new thing. And you'd often like share it around with your friends as well, which is kind of gross. But the campaign that they've put together, it features loads of like 2000s like nostalgic celebrities and stars. So there's the likes of Ed Westwick, who was obviously Chuck Bass in Gossip Girl. There's Chad Michael Murray, who was in A Cinderella Story and various other kind of programs and films of that kind of age. I think Christina Milian is in one of the videos. I think Hilary Duff, like loads of the celebrities that I really associate with that kind of era of my childhood and teens, that very much kind of ties into that time of like Lancome's Juicy Tubes. So I think they've really tapped into the nostalgia piece so well. I know they're a big brand and they've obviously got a lot of budget and a lot of remit to do this sort of stuff. And, you know, I know we often like to talk about, you know, smaller brands and stuff as well and things that they're doing well, but I think it's been a really good one. We spoke a couple of months ago, I think, about a recent Burberry campaign that was focused on kind of like the best of like British, and it was focusing on kind of like the nostalgia of Burberry being like a really quintessentially British brand. And they worked with a lot of like stars as well, of like rom-com type British stars. So there was like Kate Winslet and a few other people. And again, it just, that I think at the time, I remember thinking that feels very aligned with their brand. And I think this for me feels so aligned with Juicy Tubes and just the whole experience around it, because it wasn't just a product for me. It was a part of that period of my life that I'd almost forgotten, to be quite honest with you. And seeing this campaign, I'm literally like, I need to go out and buy a Juicy Tube again. And it brought back so many memories of like films that we'd watch at the time and things that we'd do, and going to the bowling alley on like a Friday night, and just stuff that, I don't know, it just feels like things that maybe, teens don't necessarily do now. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's been a really good campaign to watch, and it just gives me all the fuzzy warm feels.
That was the question that I was going to ask, is does it make you want to go out and buy one?
Oh yeah.
But would
like
you
it really
actually
does.
though?
Like genuinely, I really think I would.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel like not only that, I feel like I would probably do it and like get them from my friends as well, and be like almost like a bit of a, oh my God, can you believe it's 25 years? Because don't get me wrong, I wasn't buying them 25 years ago. I'm a little bit younger than that. But it actually would, I think, make me want to go and get one for that nostalgia thing. Also, because I actually think, I mean, again, do I trust my like 14-year-old self's opinion on a lip gloss? I don't know, but I feel like I did quite like them.
Yeah.
And I think now, I went from that period of my life where I didn't really wear a lot of makeup and probably just wore like lip gloss, to then went through that phase where I like caked myself in makeup and wore so much makeup. And I feel like I've come back full circle, and now I don't really wear much makeup again. So I'm probably back in my Juicy Tube era where that probably would be enough.
Ideal timing.
Yeah, I think they've timed it really well, where most people are probably going back full circle in that sense, and like minimal makeup. Obviously now there's so many like, there's like Rhode lip glosses and like Refi and Fenty and all these like, new cool brands that are bringing out these lip glosses that all like the young kids have got in their phone cases and all this stuff. But like, yeah, I'd quite like a Juicy Tube again, I think. So
no,
yeah,
I really
it's worked on
that.
me anyway.
Yeah, I love that, because obviously that's the idea of the campaign, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
That's why I said to you, would it make you go out and buy it? Because for me, I think I don't necessarily have that feeling with those. So I wouldn't look at that campaign and go, oh, I need to go out and buy that. Yeah. So it's made you feel something.
Exactly.
Which is so important. And obviously we've had our digital marketing growth program over the last few weeks, and it's been so lovely to have everyone like join us, and we've had thousands of people across the world. But something that I mentioned on the very first session was about making people feel something. So when you're going through that kind of customer journey, how do you evoke emotion? We often as marketers say, okay, well, what's the strategy? What's the audience? What are the demographics? Maybe what are some psychographics and that sort of thing. And yes, those things are important, but how do you make people feel something? Yeah. So as you said, you felt so like it kind of like evoked this emotion that maybe you'd forgotten about, and it's that era that you maybe haven't thought about in a while. That's how you make people feel something. And as you say, this is a big brand with a big budget, but you can do that without big budgets as well. Yeah. This is just a key example of how the fact that they've had this product for so long, they're kind of like bringing it back. Even smaller brands could do something like that. If you're maybe like a sweet brand or a chocolate brand, how can you maybe do something that evokes emotion from when people were younger or kids? And you see this a lot happening with people I've spoken to, like grandparents and parents before, who they've brought a certain product back because it's like, oh, I haven't seen this in so long, and it's so nostalgic, and it's that feeling piece. And I think especially if you want to drive emotion, nostalgia is one of the best ways to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's exactly right what you said about, asking me, would it make you want to buy one? Because you said I probably wouldn't. But I think this is something that, because like we mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast about sometimes, being on like LinkedIn, surrounded by other marketers, speaking about campaigns and stuff, we can often find ourselves in a bit of an echo chamber of like, oh, I love this campaign by this brand, or I don't really like this because it didn't really mean anything to me. But I think this is a classic example of, you weren't the desired audience for that campaign. I was. And did it work on me? Yeah. Did it work on you? Well, no, not really. But that's because it wasn't designed for you. And I think that's okay. I think for especially huge brands like that, if you're trying to make every campaign fit every segment of your audience, like, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. It's never going to work. They could have, whether at some point they will, kind of release a new campaign that is with the intention of driving kind of new audiences of their Juicy Tubes, you know, make it something that kind of leans into current trends and make it fit more of like, you know, the current skew of like, you know, user behaviors and stuff like that to reach maybe a younger audience. Great. I'm sure they might think about doing something like that. But this particular campaign, you know, and the nuances of like Chad Michael Murray doing a video that talks about the Cinderella story scene when he's like kissing in the rain and stuff like that. And they wore Juicy Tubes in that scene and stuff like that. I'm just like, oh my God, all these memories. Like I was that audience and it definitely worked on me. So I think it's a really good example of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, now I've got that out of my system.
Yeah. I wanted to just mention, like a quick mention, I've started listening to Emma Greedy's new podcast, which is called Aspire. There hasn't actually been that many episodes up to now, but she's basically getting on like really good people. The first episode I think was with Gwyneth Paltrow. I listened to that episode. I really like that.
I've not listened to any, but
it's very different. I think the types of people that she's getting on are very different. So she's recently had on Jay Shetty. Obviously, Gwyneth Paltrow was the first one. So she's taken a bit of an approach of guests who are obviously kind of mainstream celebrities, but with like a business twist as well. So talking a lot about kind of like childhood, then leading up to like, you know, how they got into business and stuff like that. I haven't listened to the Jay Shetty one yet, but I do want to. I probably will maybe today or the next few days. But I really like that. And I think leaning into, I've always watched Emma Greedy when she's been on Dragon's Den. So she's recently been on Dragon's Den like for a few episodes as a guest dragon.
Yep.
Really love everything that she's about. So when I started listening to that, I was like, yes, I love that. The thing is for me though, is I don't listen to every episode of every podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll just listen to the ones that pique my interest. So obviously the Gwyneth Paltrow one, there was a Founder Playbook one as well that I listened to. And then the Jay Shetty one, I've seen a few stories about that. So I am interested in that as well. So I think I'll probably lean into that and listen to it. But it's a really good one to listen to if you like kind of like businessy or they talk a lot about like marketing stuff, consumer stuff as well. So it is a really good one. I listen to all podcasts in like 1.3 though. So even though it's like quite a long podcast, I get it done in a shorter amount of time.
Can you imagine people listening to our podcast in like 1.5 or 2 or whatever? Because we speak quick anyway.
True.
We must sound like squirrels.
Yeah.
Like honestly, because I was going to say this earlier when we were talking about voice notes. A lot of my friends are also from Liverpool and speak quite quickly. And I listen to their voice notes in like 2 times, 2x, whatever it's called. And it's just like, but I think it's a great way to consume podcasts. But an interesting one, because I do feel like that, like you said, it's you know, it's celebrities, it's big names. There's quite a few out there now that are that type of podcast. But I think there's ones that are like, for example, what's the name? Like Call Her Daddy, that podcast where it's obviously it's big names, it's celebrities, but it's very much usually like the personal stories, you know, that sort of stuff. So it's interesting that it's kind of like, big names, but a bit more of like a businessy angle and like a marketing-y sort of thing. So I think can get away a little bit with like classing it as like professional development or listening work time, because it's a little bit more workified.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Emma Greedy's like one of the biggest entrepreneurs.
So there we go. It's not.
It is definitely.
Yeah, it's not like
related.
binge like trash listening. It's valuable.
Exactly. But I do love a good trash listen as well.
True.
I don't listen to every Call Her Daddy episode, but there has been some that I have listened to. I think with this in particular, it's showcasing that it is down to the host of the podcast as well, because, you know, a lot of people go on a lot of different podcasts when they may be doing like a bit of a PR run. I feel like, for example, Ed Sheeran at the moment, obviously he's a huge name. He's been going on like so many podcasts. A lot of people, when they're going through that, they go on quite a lot of podcasts or talk shows or stuff like that. But I think it comes down to the host. And I mentioned a few episodes ago, if people tuned into that, about the Rochelle Humes Ladies Who Launch podcast, which I really like because I really like Rochelle as a host. The same with Emma. I really think that they're bringing out differences in people.
Well, this is the thing,
and that
exactly.
I think is really, really good. And I love that from a podcast host. And I know being a podcast host, obviously when we used to do our guest setup, how difficult that is. So I think if you are able to, as a host, bring that out in people, it's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much more to podcasting or like, you know, hosting in general, whether it's hosting like a fireside chat or whatever, to bring out those things. Because especially if you're hosting someone, like you say, who's on a bit of like doing the rounds of like a PR tour, because most of the stuff, they'll have spoken about it on a million other podcasts. It's like, what can I get out of them? Like, what angle can I take? So yeah, I think if you find a good podcast with a good host, it's definitely a key one, isn't it? The final one I think that we both wanted to talk about, which is a bit of a fun one, and I think very, very aligned with their general brand tone of voice and something that you would expect from them, was the recent, okay, question, do you say Aldi or Aldi? Because I feel like I say them differently all the time, and then I always get people picking up on it. Do you say Aldi? Aldi?
I would say I say Aldi.
Aldi.
Yeah.
Because I think I say Aldi, but then someone, I don't know whether it was someone maybe who wasn't from Liverpool the other day, was like, oh, it's Aldi. And now I really like second guess myself.
It's like a
Nike
and a Nike situation.
Yeah. But anyway, it's Aldi, whichever one. And they recently launched, which is quite funny, a branded van that they set up outside of various different McDonald's locations across the UK, where they were serving hash browns all day. And they had, it was like on the branded van, they had AL-DAY, like not like Aldi, all day.
Which I think you should pronounce it all day.
And then they had like people standing there with signs saying like, who's even up before 11 a.m? You've got to be a clown to stop hash browns at 11 a.m. Again, they as a brand understood and like tapped into that like nationwide frustration of like just missing out on a Mackey's breakfast, like just Mackey's. Again, I feel like people will pick up on that. People say all sorts of like Maccas and Mackie D's, whatever. I say Mackey's, but people, it's like a real frustration, isn't it? So they're basically saying like, what if you want a hash brown at 4 p.m? Like, what if you have like a 7 p.m. slump and you just want a little pick-me-up hash brown? Like, it shouldn't have to just be and like stops at 11 thing. And again, promoting the fact that, you know, if you wanted to, you could go to Aldi and buy, you know, a bag of frozen hash browns and shove them in the air fryer whenever you want.
I love it. I really love it. It's just quite random for me.
It is random, definitely. But I think that for another brand, you'd probably be like, that is so random. But for Aldi, I feel like it's random, but it's like random that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's random, but it's like, but it's Aldi and they do stuff like that's a bit, do you know what I mean?
From a brand tone of voice perspective, it definitely works. I just think like if I was going to go to Aldi, I don't know if I would necessarily just go for hash browns.
No, but now you might.
But now I might, yes, true. I just think it's kind of like, would it have been better from someone who's maybe a competitor, but that does maybe all day breakfast? I don't know if there is one. I think it is a really good idea, but maybe they've pipped someone to the post. So someone like Subway, maybe. For example, they do those like hash brown
that you can get all day.
All day. So
Subway are kicking themselves now. Yeah. You know that they've got conversations going on back at Subway HQ. Like, what?
They are fuming. Like, I can tell.
Yeah. But again, I just think it shows, you know, Aldi tapping into what people want, listening. They're listening to what people are saying.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love it when brands, you know, really listen to audiences and pick up on something and use it to their advantage and put their own spin on it. And yeah, maybe it's not quite the brand you'd expect to do it, but then I don't know, if they pick up on it and it kind of fits, what are they going to do?
Exactly.
Knock on Subway's door and be like, we've got an idea for you.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? We've spoken about this recently about indirect and direct competitors. Aldi isn't a direct competitor with McDonald's. However, it is an indirect competitor because they still sell hash browns
that you can have whenever.
You've got to cook them yourself. You've got to put them in your air fryer or your oven or whatever. But they still sell them. So yes, obviously the messaging works really well. From like a quick convenience perspective, they're not a direct competitor, but it still now will hopefully be in people's minds next time they're thinking about it, because yeah, for sure it would be in my mind.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's all for today.
Yeah. Lots of AI again. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to our rambles about our favourite campaigns. Quite passionate about some of them. Yeah.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you picked up some fresh insights and maybe even a little inspiration for your next big marketing move. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate us and leave a review. It really helps us reach more amazing marketers like you. Don't forget to let us know what you thought of today's episode as well. Tag us on social media and follow us for the latest updates, behind the scenes, sneak peeks and fun marketing chats. We'll be back soon with another installment of trends, updates and campaigns that are shaping the marketing world right now. Until then, get involved in the conversation on social media and check out our Girls in Marketing membership to join a community of incredibly talented marketers just like you. See you next time.